email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or news.
The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
My guest today is David Marquet. He's a former nuclear submarine commander. He's named one of the top 100 leadership speakers by Inc. magazine. He's the author of Amazon's #1 bestseller, Turn the Ship Around, and the book we're going to be discussing today, which is called Leadership is Language. It's a Wall Street Journal bestseller as well. David, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Thanks, Clint, for having me on your show.
It's my pleasure. I was thinking maybe we could start by talking about your experience as the captain of the submarine, the Santa Fe, and how that kind of sets you on this path that you're on now, because you've written 2 books kind of based on your experience.
Yeah, well, I was in the Navy, and I was really invested in this model of leadership where the leader is the decision maker, the thinker, and the team is cast in the role of executing the decisions that the brilliant leader comes up with. And I was getting promoted because I was fitting into that role pretty well, and I was making good decisions. Now, I wasn't really super happy when I was on the team for my boss and sort of told what to do and raise my hand and say, yeah, but I have some new ideas. And yeah, no, not so much. We're interested in that. In any event, I was selected to be a submarine commander, which was awesome. And I was sent to school for 12 months to learn one submarine, the one I was scheduled to go to. At the very last minute, they said, no, you're going to go to this other submarine, the USS Santa Fe, which was the worst performing submarine in the fleet. And it had the worst morale. Every month, the Navy sent out a message that listed all the submarines in terms of their ability. You were in the Navy, Clint, so you know this, but their retention rates. The Santa Fe was at the bottom. They retained less than 10% of their sailors over the previous 12 months.
Wow.
And it was pretty dismal. And the captain quit. And so I said, Marquet, you're going to the Santa Fe, not the submarine you thought you were going to go to. And that dropped me to the floor in a fetal position. Because the problem for me wasn't these 2 things that I just described. It wasn't bad morale, it wasn't bad performance. It was the fact that it was a ship, kind of submarine I'd never been on before. One of the newest in the fleet. And so now all my credibility as a leader, the person who needs to know the right answer, to the detail of which buttons to push, which is what the captain would normally know, was removed. And I went through a journey where I had to give up control. I had to figure out how to get the team to tell me what they thought. I made a commitment to after some mistakes, after trying to give orders, which didn't work, obviously, I made a commitment never to give another order. And that was the hardest but most liberating and satisfying decision I ever made. Because
wow.
What we did was we released the passion, the intellect of the team. And so the typical model is you have one captain who runs around, makes all these decisions, tells everyone what to do, and then checks on them. So you have a leader and 135 followers. And by the end, we had 135 leaders. Everyone was thinking. There was a bias for action. It felt safe to express what you thought. And it was a wonderful and amazing thing. So I became really invested in the power of language, because the only tool I had was language. I couldn't change my team or swap positions or ask for more buy software. I didn't have any of these tools. Only language I could change was myself. So I can only change language, and I can only change myself. You think you can change other people, you try to, this is a waste of time. Just change yourself, and then other people will adjust. I'll give you an example. I kept hearing this dreaded word, they. Well, they didn't do this, and they didn't do that. And we had theys by rank, and you know the deal. Like, the officers, oh, no, the enlistment, no, the chiefs. Like, they did, no, they're telling me. And then we have theys by department. Engineering, operation, whatever. So we have all this, we have this matrix of they. And I just got pissed off one day, and I beat my fist on the table. I said, there's no they on Santa Fe. You have to use the word we. So we started this awkward phase where people would say, well, they wanted to say they ordered the wrong part, but they had to say we ordered the wrong part. Knowing that, it was the supply department, not whatever. But I saw how it changed our brains. And literally our brains grew new connections so that when I saw people in the supply department, I no longer thought of them as we, I thought of them as they. They is the word in my brain for someone who's not in my tribe. It's a person who I don't trust. It's a person who I have to watch out for. It's a person who I compete with. We is a person in my tribe. It's a person I can trust and I collaborate with. And so what happens is in companies is we have all these little tiny circles of we, and we give some lofty words about, well, we really want everyone to be more of a team and have less stovepipes, but we don't actually change the words we use. And all you need to do is change the words we use. Just start referring to the next bigger group as a we, and then eventually, depending upon how young you are and how malleable your brain is, it will feel like a we. And so anyway, so that was a story, and then we ended up doing a bunch of after I wrote the first book, doing research on what does it sound like to have teams that have resilient language versus inherently fragile language.
Right. So the first book was called Turn the Ship Around, and this one is Leadership is Language, which I enjoyed both of them, but today we're really talking about the language piece. And you talk in the new book about leadership styles, new versus the old industrial revolution style. Why don't the old styles work today?
Yeah, I always felt like I was programmed to say certain things. We go through our day and we're not deliberative about what we say. We just, if someone comes to me and says, well, I think what you said back there, I think that was a bad idea, I will then generally try and I'll defend that idea. If someone comes to me and tells me something that I think is unusual, sounds wrong to me, I will sort of poke them with explaining, why it's right, not from a position of curiosity that it might be right, but from a position of, well, maybe I can, by some artfully crafted questions, get you to a more enlightened position, i.e. my position. And the language is the language of the Industrial Revolution. The objective of organizations during the Industrial Revolution was to reduce variability. Because it was a manufacturing revolution, it was a visual and physical manufacturing revolution, variability on the assembly line is an error. And so you want to squeeze that out as much as possible. That was number one. Number two is the fundamental structure of an organization during the Industrial Revolution was we had thinkers at the top, which we called leaders or managers or white collar or college graduates, something like that. And then we had the workers who back in the 1800s were, high percentage of them were illiterate. And we called those blue collar, we called them followers, we called them workers. And the idea was the thinkers would make the decisions for the doers. And we separated the two fundamental activities of work, thinking and doing, by rank. And that vestige lives on, and that's no longer useful. It doesn't take much to convince people, well, wouldn't it be better to get everybody invested in the thinking instead of just like some segregated, anointed few? Well, yes, of course. And so they want to draw people into thinking. We want to draw people into more collaborative conversations. But the language that we're programmed to use on a day-to-day basis is antithetical to that. For example, we ask binary questions. Is that going to work? Is that safe? And that is the worst. I mean, it is a nail in the coffin of having a real conversation because it forces a yes/no, binary, arbitrary response as opposed to, hey, how safe is that? Or how likely is that to work? Now I can have a real conversation and it makes it easier and safer. I'm giving power to the person. I'm giving voice to the person to speak up. And again, it's not like we are evil. It's just that we've been programmed so deeply that we don't realize the programming that we have. we're applying a reduced variability language structure to times when we want to embrace variability. Decision-making benefits from embracing variability, getting all the ideas out on the table. But the normal thing at work is to reduce variability. That's why we have to have, quote, special brainstorming sessions. That's evidence that it's not the normal way of like working. We have to say, oh, well, let's have a special day off so we can go swimming. Means swimming is not our normal day at work. So, yeah, that's we've been programmed to speak a unhelpful language for the modern era.
Right. Well, you break it up. You call it like your playbook. Now you tell the story about sitting by John Gruden on a plane, and that's where the playbook idea, I guess, came from. And there's two plays from your playbook that really resonate with me, which are, one was collaborate, not coerce, and the other is commit, not comply.
Yeah.
Why? Let's start with collaboration. Why is that so important? Because traditionally, isn't the leader or the person in charge supposed to know everything already?
Well, first of all, I think it's good to know your craft. But when I say know everything, like, for example, I would know the laws of thermodynamics, and I would understand the startup sequence on the torpedo. But that doesn't mean I know how the enemy will react after the first sonar ping, or which behind what seamount he's going to be hiding. You can't know that. You can't know everything. So anyone who thinks they knows everything is an idiot, because they obviously don't know. You can't know everything. You can know your job really, really well, but that still doesn't mean you know what to do. So we think we collaborate when we don't. For example, I had we're doing a master class with a global technology company, and I had 10 senior, highly paid executives in a room sitting at 5 tables, and I gave them a question. I said, at your table, you have 90 seconds, and I want to see which table gets it better. Come up with the answer to the following questions. And I gave them something like, what's the population of Ethiopia, or something like that. And even before I said, ready, go. And even before I said go, someone at one table blurted out a number. Let's say it was 125 million. And then very quickly that table came, oh yeah, 125 million. And then the other table came to 125 million. And it turned out that was the CEO and the co-founder who blurted out that number. Now, it's a pretty good guess. Population is like about 119 million. But the point is that CEO is not getting anything back from their team, because if they think it's 125 million, everyone else just agrees with them. Like, what's the point of that? And then I said, well, did you guys collaborate? Oh, yeah, of course we did. We didn't. I said, why'd you run the meeting that way? I said, what do you mean, what meeting? Like this thing you just had, this 90 seconds you had to come up with make a decision as a group. Well, I don't know. They don't, like, why did you discuss it? In other words, like, what are you talking about? Like, why did you discuss it first? Why did you let one person anchor the group? Well, why didn't you run it a different way? I don't know what any different way there is. Well, the better way to do it is everyone writes down on a card what they think before we contaminate them with what anyone thinks. That's the moment of maximum variability. As soon as the first person opens their mouth, you start shrinking variability and cognitive variability in what's expressed in the discussion. So the person who thinks way differently from everybody else, which, by the way, is going to be the most innovative and creative, it's where the innovation and creativity lives. Not everything that's different is innovative and creative, but everything that's innovative and creative initially sounds different. They won't talk, or they'll just agree and go along to get along to go along. So again, it's not like we're choosing to run ways. We're choosing to have a maladaptive language. We're just not choosing. We're just using automatic words. We just do it. Well, that's the way I've seen every meeting run. Another example is people will say, let's say we make a decision, and we're gonna come out with new Coke. Like, let me explain this, guy. Formula's stale, blah blah blah. We got to make this new invention, new Coke. Does that make sense? Right? We good? Does that make sense? Again, why did I say that? Am I really interested in feedback? No, because otherwise I would say, hey, how could this be wrong? What's different? What doesn't make sense? You need to make that the socially easy path, not putting a nail in the coffin of you disagreeing with me as CEO. Like Boeing 737. Hey, Airbus getting ahead of us, blah, blah, blah. This is our chance. So we got this. We've had FAA, blah, blah. Very important. Does this make sense? Oh, yeah, boss. And then we blame the team. Oh, you guys had a chance. Well, yeah, but we didn't really create the environment where it's easy to speak up and tell you that was a boneheaded idea.
Yeah, you tell the story in the book about Boeing and how they promised at one of their rollout event that was going to be flying in 2 months, and it was 29 months later that it actually flew. So
yeah, with the 787, they were so far off, and the CEO was being very public about it. Now imagine you're the guy they had problems in multiple areas with the plane when it came out, cabling, subcontractors, attachments of the carbon fiber, batteries. And if you're an engineer, there's no way the thing's coming out, but you're not going to stick your hand up and say, hey, by the way, boss, there's no way we're meeting that.
Right. Not only boss, but boss's boss's boss. We're not meeting that.
Exactly.
So I think, if I remember correctly, you call that kind of anchor bias, where the leader kind of throws out an answer and everybody else kind of populates around that. And so one of the key takeaways I had was that the boss or the senior person should really answer last, they don't bias the conversation. So I think
that's a great start. But even then, you're still the first person who speaks still biases the group. What we say is vote first, then discuss. Maximum variability occurs prior to discussion. The point is not to get everyone, hey, let's all get on board here. Okay, well, maybe that is the point, but then don't be surprised. Oh, I didn't know you guys had to cheat to make this thing, this diesel thing work. I mean, don't be surprised by that.
Yeah. Another one that I liked was you frame everything in the book around red work versus blue work. And so how are they different? How are you differentiating red versus blue in the book?
There's two fundamental different kinds of work. There's work that benefits from reducing variability, and there's work that benefits from embracing variability. Manufacturing, generally physical things, flying an airplane, conducting surgery, starting a nuclear reactor, benefits from reducing variability. Throwing a basketball into a net 40 feet away. Benefits from reducing variability. I want precision. I want focus. I want compliance with the procedure. However, the decisions that wrap around that, okay, what are we going to make? Should we start the airplane and fly across country? Benefit from embracing variability. So if you're doing it right, your brain flips from one mode to the other throughout the day, the week, and the month, and the year, and your life. So I make a decision. We embrace variability. We want everyone to participate. We want different opinions. We work very hard to structure the conversation so that it's easy for the people who think differently to speak up. Once a decision is made, we want focus. We don't want to be distracted. We want to be dedicated and focused with the idea that in 2 weeks or a week or an hour, whatever it happens to be, we will stop, put our pencils down, we'll raise our heads, we'll look left and right, we'll then re-embrace variability. But the best teams are super, super focused when they're focused, and they're super, super broad perspective when they're in broad perspective mode. If you don't understand, are we in decision mode or are we in doing mode, then you're going to be muddled and you're going to be maladapted language and maladapted processes all the time. You won't be optimized in a focused way when you want to be, and you won't be optimized for an embracing variability way. So those are the two different kinds of work.
You have an analogy in the book that I really liked about the open water swimming.
Yeah.
And how the course is laid out with the orange buoys, and the swimmer is most efficient when their face is in the water, but then they can't see where they're going. So they periodically have to look up and recite and then make the course corrections. And I love that because you're moving back and forth. You call it the rhythm between red work and blue work.
Right.
Because you're doing, I guess the red work is the swimming part, and then the blue work is when you stick your head back up and recite and recalibrate.
Right. So when I'm swimming, the fastest way to swim is head down, perfect stroke. Your head down allows your hips to rise up. You want your hips and heels up near the surface of the water, minimizing drag. everyone knows that not only swimming. If you swim with your head up constantly, it is really hard and slow. But I can't see where I'm going. In a pool I got a line, but in the ocean I don't. And so you have to decide, how many strokes am I going to take before I look up? If you say, well, I'm going to take 5 strokes and look up every 5 strokes, you're spending a lot of time with your head up. And now you learn to be efficient at doing that. But if you can swim straighter for longer, maybe you can do 10 strokes. But that's the decision that leaders need to make. Is how many strokes are we taking? How many weeks are we going to let the project go before we pause and see if we're on track? Is it 2 weeks, like a 2-week sprint in an agile thing, or is it 2 months? And is it the same throughout the life of the project? Generally, we think at the beginning of a project, you want more frequent pauses to reflect because there's more decision space and there's more variability. Toward the end of the project, you want the bias to shift from decision-making to just let's get the thing done. We're building a 4-wheeled electric-powered sedan. So the big decisions have been made.
Right. I think that's why that story resonated with me, because I do a lot of project work, and that's exactly how it works with project work. We do a lot of decision making on the front end. As we build a plan, we have all these conversations, and the variability is important. And then you start executing the project, and your head is down. Now you're into the red work phase. But you have to come back and do course corrections. And for us, that's every 2 weeks we get back together and update the plan and say, okay, well, what course corrections do we need to make? And that just repeats throughout the life of the project. So I think that's why I really like that story, that analogy. You also talk in the book about something called share of voice. What is that, and why is it important to be aware of it?
So we analyzed transcripts of teams and the way they actually talk. We weren't interested in summaries of meetings or the notes or anything like that. I was only interested only interested in transcripts where we had the actual words that people said. And one of the transcripts that was very illuminating was a 500-page transcript of a ship that sunk in a hurricane in 2015, knowing the hurricane was there. And when you counted the words, all you needed to do was count the words. You didn't even need to know what language the words were in. But if you just count the words in a group, there is a general trend that the person who gets paid the most is allocated the most number of words by the group, or just takes the most number of words, speaks the most. And then the number of words people speak is roughly proportional to their salary. Now, on the ship, it turned out that every time there was a captain, officer, and crewman on the bridge of the ship, this pattern was precisely fulfilled. Every single time, if you look at 3 different watches, all 3 watches had the exact same pattern. It was eerie. So that is a fragile pattern, because what's happening is the senior person is basically imprinting their will on the group, and we don't know what the other people know. We don't see what they see. And if I'm right, great. But if I'm wrong, the likelihood of the group fixing it is low. I can fantasize in my own head that, oh no, they'll tell me. But we know from science that humans are less likely to speak up. Every once in a while someone does, so you can convince yourself, oh yeah, my team speaks up, and they tell me when I'm wrong. Yeah, but you don't know the 6 times that they thought you were wrong, but they didn't say anything. So share a voice means equalizing that. So if you have 3 people in a meeting, each person should get about a third of the words. 10 people, each person should get about a 10. Now, it doesn't need to be precise, but when you're sitting in the meeting and you're running it, let's say you're the leader and you're running the meeting, your objective at any moment should be, who's overspeaking, who's underspeaking, and then see if you can get the people who haven't participated to participate, and see if you get the people who are saying too much to pipe down. And that's a more resilient pattern. Then we found research by a professor at MIT who's actually has evidence that groups that have a more equal share of voice are more resilient in terms of making decisions. So not only is it anecdotal, but there's some scientific evidence that is what you want. But it runs counter to our programming.
Yeah, I do a lot of facilitation, and that's always a challenge. You get the 2 or 3 people that just want to dominate the conversation, and then you get the people, I don't care how good you are, you can't draw them out. They don't want to say a word. They just they don't really want to be there. So it is a challenge to try to get that balance for sure.
Yeah, we have, it's about safety. It's about safety. So you need to structure it in a way that makes it safe. Sometimes what we'll do is we call it one, sum, all. So we'll say, okay, everyone take a minute, just write down on a card what your answer is or what your thoughts are for this. And then we'll say discuss it in pairs. So now it's sum, or discuss it at your table. Discuss it in pairs, then your table, and then you go to the group. So the idea is, a person will, each person, no matter how quiet, will participate in the one, and they'll probably participate in the pairs. So the idea is then it becomes safer as you move to the bigger groups.
Yeah, that's a good point. You already touched on it, but I like the way that it was really enlightening for me when I read the book too, the way the questions get worded, and you're really big about the binary, it's kind of staying away from those and really opening things up. Like, how could, what am I missing? What could I be doing better? Those are questions that invite, as you say, they invite discourse and discussion as opposed to, let me ask a binary question. Because I really don't want your opinion. Right.
Yeah. We think we want your opinion, but then this binary question just comes out of our mouth. And it makes, and we may truly want your opinion, but it's harder. I was on an airplane, and a lady in the middle of the night fell down, stood up, fell down, and the flight attendants came over and like, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you hurt?" And she was like, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." And then they walked away, and I said, "Well, how are you doing?" And she's like, "Oh, I feel just a little lightheaded. Maybe I stood up too fast." And so the flight attendants got nothing out of her. She was mostly embarrassed. But the problem was they were asking the wrong question. They were saying, "Are you okay? Or are you hurt?" Which requires someone to say, "Yeah, I'm hurt." But she really wasn't hurt, but she wasn't perfect. But the question doesn't really leave room for that. But if you said, "How are you feeling? Where does it hurt? Or what hurts?" But I really like starting with, my trick is just start the question with the word "how," because I'm super addicted to these binary. I love them. They make things so fast. Oh, is that going to work? Yes. Okay, great. We'll do it.
Another play from the playbook that I liked was connect with people rather than confronting or conforming to your role.
Yeah.
And you say that connect is the enabling play that makes all other plays work better. How so?
In the Industrial Revolution, you didn't want to know your people. Knowing them as human beings made it harder for you to just tell them what to do, because we're just coercing people into doing what we wanted them to do. They didn't really care what your life objectives were and how many kids you had and whatever. It just got in the way. So we had rules against fraternization and that kind of thing. Now, however, if I want to make it feel safe for you to show up to a meeting and have retrospective and say, "Hey, how are we doing?" And you're a member of the team, which, oh, by the way, helped make decisions to put us on a current path, and to say, well, how can we do better? If you don't feel safe, you're not going to come up with ways to be better, especially if it involves things that you did, that you were part of. And and you're not going to feel safe in an environment where I force you to comply. Oh, well, no, you're a tier 3 worker and I'm a tier 2 worker. So, so we need to connect as humans so that we can feel safe, so that we can run what I call the improve play. In other words, let's get better. And when we don't do that, we're stuck with the prove. And we spend all our days creating presentation of ourselves, which is, oh, we're capable, we're good. And all that energy simply gets us in the way from being capable and good 10 years from now. The way to be capable and good 10 years from now is to give up being capable and good now, or trying to prove that you're capable and good. You're just saying, yeah, how can I get better? What can we get better? Oh, you know what? I think we could do this better. It's hard. It's like, so I go give a speech, I record it, I get on the airplane, I come back home. The last thing I want to do is watch myself give that speech.
Right.
But I try to force myself, because I'm like, oh my gosh, oh, I said that. Oh man, I could have said it differently, etc.
Yeah, I experienced that as well. When I edit the podcast later, I'm like, wow, I didn't do that question well at all.
Yeah, you have to.
I have no choice.
Yeah, you have no choice. So good for you.
Now, you mentioned intent-based leadership a couple times in the book, and I know that's also the name of your website. What is that?
So we think this word intent is kind of a magic word, and most organizations are permission-based organizations, which means I get permission. If I don't have permission, I don't do it. If I ask for permission, I need to hear yes, or else the answer is no. If I hear nothing, the answer is no. And one of the key language changes that we were able to do was to replace "I'd like permission to" or "I request permission to" ABC to "I intend to do ABC." And that changed everything, because when you say that, our agreement was you have permission. I can stop you, but if you don't hear anything, you're going to do it. So you send an email to the CEO and say, next week we're going to change our marketing plan, or next week we're going to present a consulting program to a client, and here's what we're going to tell them. And the boss doesn't respond because they're in Tahiti, or they're too busy, or they looked at it and they saw it. It doesn't matter. We move on. We own it. And I just think it's magic in so many ways. It also builds a culture of inviting feedback, because people are stating what they're going to do before they do it, which it invites other people to give comment on that. It creates a sense of ownership and a tremendous bias for action. And there are limits, and it's hard, and you're changing your language because we've been programmed not to speak like that. But this was super, super powerful. On the submarine, we ended up creating more submarine commanders than any other submarine, 10 submarine commanders. And we ended up with three of the officers from the submarine went and ran provincial reconstruction teams in Afghanistan. They were like standing in Helmand province negotiating with tribal leaders and NGOs, and that makes no sense, but they were selected amongst the whole military because they were thinking, and they were able to speak to people in a way which respected and invited dissenting views and made it feel safe. And that was, of course, a highly valuable skill when you got to Afghanistan.
Right. This goes to show you Navy guys can do anything. So
Navy guys can do anything.
Well, David, we've covered a lot of ground today, but we really only scratched the surface. If someone wants to learn more about you, your work, or intent-based leadership, how can they do that? Yeah,
I'd say a couple ways. Number one, feel free to check out the books, Turn the Ship Around, and Leadership is Language. We have a website, intentbasedleadership.com, and for fun, go to YouTube and type in Leadership Nudges, and we have a whole host of these little 1 to 2 minute blurbs. I put them out weekly. I've been doing it for years. I like 400 at this point, of just little tidbits, little reminders to help us all be better leaders.
That's excellent. Thanks for the conversation, David.
Cheers, Clint. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett. To find out more about Clint, go to projectsuccess.com or pick up Clint's book, The Project Success Method, at amazon.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.